morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. This is public hearing in Committee of the Whole regarding bill numbers 190152, 190153, 190154, and resolution number 190164. Mr. Stitt, please read the titles of the bills and resolutions.
Bill number 190152, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2020 through 2025 inclusive. Bill number 190153, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2020 capital budget. Bill number 190154, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2020. Resolution number 190164, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2020 through 2024 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2019, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the Authority, pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this Council, approved by the Mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the City and the Authority.
Haven't you memorized that by now? Do you really have to read it? Yeah. Kidding. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal year 2020, a capital program and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2020 through fiscal year 2025. Today, we will hear testimony from these city departments: Septa, Community College, Controller's Office, and department callback scheduled to Free Library. Mr. Stitt, our first witness testify is
Septa General Manager Jeffrey Nipple.
Good morning, Mr. Nipple. We have your written testimony. I know you know the score here. If you could give us a summary, and we have questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Councilman Greenlee, members of City Council, and other guests. I am Jeff Kneppel, and I am honored to come before you today as the General Manager for the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. I am joined by SEPTA Philadelphia Board Member Michael Carroll to my right, Deputy Managing Director, Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. SEPTA is pleased to submit testimony supporting the authority's $87.6 million fiscal year 2020 operating budget request, and I am grateful for the opportunity to provide the members of Council with an overview of SEPTA initiatives and milestones achieved during the past year. I believe you have copies of my complete testimony, and if you agree, I would like to summarize its content and get right to any questions you may have.
Yes, sir.
Members of my staff are also with me today to help provide any additional information requested. SEPTA's operating budget is funded through subsidies from local, state, and federal governments, the fare box, and other revenues. The city's $87.6 million contribution represents 6% of the authority's total operating budget and enables SEPTA to meet its state legislatively mandated requirement to secure local matching funds to leverage state operating subsidy dollars of approximately $739 million. SEPTA's fiscal year 2020 operating budget maintains current service levels with no increase in fares for customers. For SEPTA's capital budget, the city's $4.58 million contribution will support a total capital program this year of approximately $675 million, advancing projects including modernization of 30th Street Station on the Market-Frankfurt line, ongoing rehabilitation of the 15th Street and City Hall Stations complex, accessibility improvements to Susquehanna-Dauphin and Tasker-Morris stations on the Broad Street line, expansion of the Wissahickon Transportation Center, and continued improvements to the Center City Concourse network. Council's continued support to allocate operating and capital funds in the city's budget is sincerely appreciated. SEPTA also works to preserve state and federal funding that is critical to our operations and state of good repair efforts. It is, however, an uncertain time for public transportation funding at the state level, as an ongoing lawsuit by the trucking industry continues to threaten state transit capital funding. Despite these challenges, SEPTA is working every day to support the mobility and livelihood of the people who live, work, and visit Philadelphia and the Southeast region. From social responsibility and environmental sustainability to quality of life and economic opportunity, SEPTA is proud to be the backbone of this city and the region. Transit remains the most affordable, safest, and greenest way to get around. A study this year by eConsult Solutions found that transit ridership saves the average Philadelphia household nearly $1,000 per year. Traveling by public transportation is 10 times safer than driving, and transit has always been a more environmentally friendly alternative. Septa has completed the first of 4 solar panel installation projects on what will be the second largest solar installation in Philadelphia history, and we are now reviewing proposals to convert 20% of our electricity demand to renewable sources. Strong partnerships with the city, including as a member of the Zero Waste and Litter Cabinet, are also making for a cleaner, greener Philadelphia. Septa is building the future with a strong and diverse workforce of 9,500 employees who reflect our ridership and the communities we serve. 51% of Septa employees live in Philadelphia. 63% of our workforce are minorities, and 23% are women. Septa is also committed to improving equity and diversity in our management ranks. 5 years ago, women and minorities made up 52% of Septa's management employees. Today, 59% of salaried and management employees are minorities or women. Over the same period of time, the percentage of Septa's workforce that reports to a minority or a woman has grown significantly. Currently, 45% of our employees report to a minority or woman supervisor, up from 26% in 2014. Promoting growth and opportunities for local business owners is also a priority, and I am pleased to report continued progress in strengthening our Federal Disadvantaged Business Enterprise DBE program. Our directory of DBE certified firms grew to 834, of which 24% are Philadelphia-based. This year, we streamlined the DBE certification process to ensure timely approval, and there is currently no backlog. Over the past 3 years, Septa has exceeded 16% DBE participation on newly awarded contracts. Everyone at Septa takes immense pride in delivering reliable, accessible, sustainable, and customer-focused public transit service every day. Like transit agencies across the nation, we have experienced a decrease in bus ridership over the last few years. We are working closely with the city and other stakeholders to reverse this trend. As we begin the comprehensive bus network optimization initiative, interim measures are yielding positive results. In addition to the recent release of bus frequency maps and the launch of the new Route 49, we are also pleased with the successful partnership with the City of Philadelphia surrounding the Market and Chestnut Bus Lane Enforcement Program. Safety and security are the foundations of everything we do. Septa invests in public safety education, partnering with Operation Lifesaver and Vision Zero Philadelphia, among others. And I would be remiss not to mention that tomorrow is SEPTA's 7th annual Make the Safe Choice Public Safety Day. SEPTA also continues to research and incorporate technology to help reduce accidents on the SEPTA system. Approximately 75% of SEPTA buses have audible turn alerts, and the entire fleet will be equipped by 2020 or earlier. The last year has seen continued progress in the implementation of SEPTA Key. There are now 1 million key cards in circulation, and more than 268 million rides have been taken using key cards. Last month, we launched a refreshed, responsive SEPTA Key website, and we continue to seek public input for recommendations and improvements. SEPTA is working hard to build the future and to partner with the city in many initiatives, including vital efforts to address homelessness, reduce litter, and rethink traffic patterns and improve pedestrian safety. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you about SEPTA's accomplishments over the past year. City Council's continued support of public transit through the city matching funds for the authority's operating and capital budgets is greatly appreciated. We will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. A couple of questions. I know both the Council President and I were big supporters of Route 49 that came through, and by the way, I take it myself with this great invention that was made with the senior
Route
pass here.
49 is up to 1,900 riders already.
I was going to say, it's been a success so far.
Yes,
great.
Moving fast. We were hoping for 3,000 by the end of the year, so we're doing very well towards that goal.
That's great. And I know some of the concerns, particularly in the northern part of the district, or certainly by me, that we're concerned about maybe congestion or something, hasn't seemed to have happened so far.
Very good.
So that's great. Speaking of congestion, in your written testimony, you state that congestion has the largest impact on the quality and reliability of the bus network. I think you touched on that a little bit. What does SEPTA believe should be done to improve the speed and reliability of its bus fleet? bus
Okay,
seats?
this is a good question. So, with a bus network, there's much that we can control. You know, our drivers, the condition of the buses, we putting Wi-Fi on our new buses. We're doing a lot of things to make them attractive. Screens on the buses for advertising information, all kinds of things that we can do to make the service as attractive from the things we control. But what is concerning is the slowing down of our network that has occurred over a period of time. And it is due to congestion. There's a lot of people competing for Philadelphia's relatively narrow street network that goes, that actually dates back to the 1700s. The map's the same. So there's a lot of challenges. You have bikes out there. You have deliveries now that have increased, like Amazon deliveries. You have more pedestrians. You have Uber. You have Lyft. There's a lot of competition for those streets. So as we move forward, what we're looking at is a complete review of our bus network. And that's something that we are partnering with the city on. So we're going to be looking at all of our schedules. It's been really decades since Septa looked at our schedule, and there's a lot of things that have changed in the city as well. You know, just look at the number of restaurants that are out, that have outdoor spaces, and the weekends, and a lot of things have changed. So we're looking at our bus network and doing what other cities have done, which is really a redesign of their schedules, or for us, we feel that it's more of an optimization. But the other part we're doing is partnering with the city, and we're actually working on an MOU so that if we're going to take all this effort and money, we want to make sure that the city will partner with us to do, and I can let Mike talk about that in a minute, but let us, you know, that they will work on the things that can help make this system faster. As far as, and more attractive. As far as, you know, what we are going to do, we're going to, you know, first we're starting out with a lot of outreach. We're not making decisions, you know, without talking to people. And so that'll be very much a part of the process. But Mike, maybe you could talk about some of the things that the city is putting in the MOU.
And let me just add, is enforcement also an issue of, you know,
Yes.
you probably want to talk about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director for
Thank you.
Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. And yeah, like the General Manager has said, there's certainly a lot of things that Septa will be doing, and there's certainly a lot of things that the city will be doing. The congestion issues that affect everybody else affect the bus. But maybe even more so because a lot of the shortcuts that folks who are driving around doing deliveries will take to get access to the curb have a disproportionate impact on Septa. So you talk about enforcement, our experience was pretty good with the work we did on Chestnut and Market, and we want to ramp that up. We're going to try and incorporate not just more boots on the ground, so to speak, but we want to look at opportunities to do automated enforcement as well. And so we're looking at the kind of the legal requirements to do automated enforcement. So far, the picture looks pretty good. Okay. We've got a sense that we don't necessarily need to get any special authorization, and we're hopeful that we can work with Septa based on the fact that they have some cameras on their buses, and we've got cameras that are located pretty strategically around Center City, and we can try and make sure that people aren't blocking the bus lanes where we have bus lanes, and to the extent that we have the ability that they're not stopping in the bus zones, you know, where the bus stops are. And we want to layer on top of that a little bit of extra focus on the infrastructure itself. We have some projects that are going to take a little bit of time to deliver, but we're going to do the work in lockstep with the optimization that the general manager's been speaking about to identify those corridors where we really want to give as much as possible the priority treatments to the buses so that they can get through the fastest. So that's the basics there.
Sure. And when you say about enforcement, I think the council president want me to point out that maybe those public safety officers,
that's right,
if they're approved,
that's right, yeah,
in the primary vote, that they could also assist in that measure. Just one more thing, now turn to the other members. So, Knubel, you mentioned the Septa key card, and I know on your website right now it says Septa key card cannot be used for multiple riders at this time. And I understand in other cities you can do that. Is that in the works as maybe changing that policy, or?
Yeah. There are not very many transit networks that have that feature yet.
Okay.
So I think Chicago does, but it's something that we're looking at as we change our fare policy going into, not this year, no fare increase, but in the future. And we'll be looking at a lot of things. We'll be looking at transfers. Okay. We'll be looking at the whole rate structure. There's been a lot of change in recent years. People are making very different decisions almost on a case-by-case trip basis. They're looking at how they plan their travel. So we have an awful lot of things to look at, and that certainly is one of the things that we have to look at.
Things keep changing, evolving, right? But overall, I think you're doing a good job. I'm a Septa rider since I think there was Septa, so.
Thank you.
I think you react very well to the changes that are going on out there.
Thank you.
And I love that Route 49. I'll just add that one more time. Councilman Dom, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Morning.
I saw in your testimony that at the state level, you mentioned on page 1 that transportation funding is facing serious consequences as a result of a lawsuit filed in federal court by the trucking industry. And it says here that 4 quarterly fiscal year payments to PennDOT for transit capital funding weren't made. Can you explain how much money we're talking about, and how do you plan on dealing with that issue?
Mm-hmm. So for this current year's capital program, we were supposed to receive, I think, about $305 million. Unfortunately, the Turnpike was not sending the money to the state because of the lawsuit, and the state then couldn't in turn send it to the transportation agencies. So for us, what PennDOT was able to do was come up with kind of a one-year help, and I think they were able to push it up to $288 million. So for this fiscal year, which runs through July, we've been mostly okay. It's really next year. PennDOT really doesn't have a whole lot more rabbits they can pull out of a hat. And so right now, the fear is that we would drop from what is typically planned at $350 million to $107 million. So that's a big drop. On the good news, the lawsuit against the Turnpike and PennDOT, the Truckers Association, was not successful. They have filed an appeal, but I think that we're hopeful that things will continue to go well. And really what we heard the other day, and I know it was in the papers, was that the Turnpike is looking at bonding right now. So they may make that decision even before the appeal is filed. We're not sure yet, but we're hopeful, and having a win in court is a big help. So we're hopeful right now, but fingers crossed.
And what would be our contingency plan if we weren't successful?
We've already started to pause certain projects and slow things down. It's for next year, for our capital program, we literally can't stop things that we already have in the pipeline. And so we would run a negative balance for next year. And so we would have to do a lot of extraordinary measures, including, I guess, borrowing money to be able to deal with the fact that we would have a negative capital budget for the year.
I have another question for you. Do you have any idea what your, on average, bus capacity is for ridership? Like if you had a bus, how many seats are typically on a bus?
Oh, gosh. 39?
39. And what would you say, are they typically 50% occupied, 30% occupied, 80%?
It really depends where the route, where it starts, where it finishes. I mean, it changes all throughout the trip. But some of them are very, very heavy routes that may be filled almost instantly if they're picking up customers from, let's say, a transportation agency, like a transportation center.
And do you have different size buses or one size?
Yes, we have articulated buses that are longer and carry more. Yeah, yeah, and the 39 seats is not as much as we can actually get into the bus. What's the full number? About 60.
60, okay. And then I'm going to just go back to one other question, or actually two more. Navy Yard expansion, is that on the table? And also, is there any talk of expanding the Frankfurt Transportation Center? Is there any talk of expanding the Frankfurt out further up into the northeast?
Okay. First of all, there was a study that PennDOT and Septa worked on for the Navy Yard. When they looked at it, it's still based on the way the plan is for the Navy Yard over the next decade or two with growth. It was not really in a situation to qualify for New Start's money. So what Septa and PIDC and the partners down at the Navy Yard are looking at is how to do some interim improvements in bus service and other things to make it stronger. Doesn't mean that we won't have an extension someday to the Navy Yard. It's just not quite there yet. In terms of FTC and going north, in the past, people have looked more at coming off of the Broad Street line and going north, I think out of Hunting Park area and branching and going up along the boulevard. And I think at one point there was even at the Sears complex, there was a station underneath their parking garage. So that continues to be something that people talk about, but they're not looking at it in earnest yet. Go ahead.
I would just mention that along the lines of what the general manager was just saying, we're about 18 months into what we call the direct bus service, which runs on the Roosevelt Boulevard from FTC out to the Chamonix Mall. It's been a pretty big success. Ridership levels are up significantly over the previous lines, and we do intend to extend that down to Broad Street at Hunting Park. So the option to improve bus service, provide sort of a higher quality bus service, allows us to figure out whether capital-intensive extensions make more sense or not without really taking on that risk.
Okay, one last question. I think I asked this last year and the year before. It might be to you, Mike, more so, that are we going to do a traffic study from river to river? Is that on the books to be done, a traffic study? Because what's happening is it's not just buses, it's not just Uber and Lyft, it's all these deliveries that are going on, right, because our economy has dramatically changed how people buy things.
So what we're looking at, to put in plain English, is a number of traffic studies, and there's work that's going on now that's looking at the delivery issues, mostly focused on truck deliveries. We're also going to be looking at the kind of information infrastructure to see how we can improve the management that we exercise from the Traffic Operations Center. You know, that's going to get paired at some point in time. The work that goes into the bus network optimization then can get folded into this as we look how to prioritize treatment. So there's not going to be one big study that wraps it all together, but the different efforts are going to go forward in lockstep, and we'll be sharing information between these efforts.
So let me just make sure I'm clear. Are we doing a traffic study?
I would say we're probably doing 3 or 4 traffic studies,
okay,
each with a different theme.
And when do you think the results of those studies will occur?
Well, ultimately, I think the most impactful work will be the bus network redesign and the work that comes out of that, and I'll let the general manager talk about the time frame for that.
The comprehensive. So that will start up right away. We initially thought we were going to use a lot more outside consulting, but we've looked at it. We had an initial study done by a consultant who felt that about 70% of our service was in the right place. So we're really undergoing what we're now calling, instead of a redesign, an optimization. It'll be driven a lot by internal people, but we will have some consultants helping us. There's a lot of outreach that goes into the program as well, and we'll be working with the city on that. And then it'll take anywhere from 2 to 3 years to actually make all the changes to the bus network.
The first major might not be the right word. The first cut at the data optimization work that then can feed into the bus optimization work should be done in about a year. So that's a good time for them to start looking for some documentation.
Okay, I know my time's up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Reynolds-Brown, please.
Good morning, leadership.
Morning.
It's never too late to say thank you, and I don't know that we did last year when you and the chairman of the board and the leadership at Septa made a decision to help Eagle cheerleaders, fans, and enthusiasts ride free on Septa. That was a big deal, and it should not go overlooked.
Thank you, thank you. I wouldn't have wanted to collect fares that day anyway, but we got sponsorships for that, and that was really a big key to us being able to move very, very large numbers of people, so that was great. And the city's approach of having the parade route extended over a much bigger distance really did help us as well. We made that recommendation, and it was fantastic that they followed through. So having a much longer parade route really, really helped us.
Yeah, it was a huge, huge partnership. And too often we hear the bad stories where companies, corporate Philadelphia, and government does not work together, so it needs to be recognized. Thank you for your discussion of where the authority is with regards to women in the executive suite and the progress I believe I've witnessed with regards to MBE, WBE participation. Talk to me more about the Women in Trades initiative. Is that a staple institutional practice now within the organization? Because my office was intimately involved with one of your former HR professionals to help bring that to bear.
It's actually, if you know my 31-year career at Septa, I worked in engineering and maintenance and construction, and so I was around a lot of very capable women, not a lot, but the ones that we had were absolutely fantastic. And so when I became general manager, it became very clear to me when I looked at how few women there were in the trades and how hard it can be when you're one of just a few.
An anomaly versus...
So I immediately formed a group that we have where they get together, I think quarterly, and we have a facilitator for that group, and it really helps the women that are here already connect with each other and feel supported. And then we're also using that group to do outreach. Like I think we have an event in it's June, where we will have a job fair, and we'll have our women in the trades there at it and continue to push for more and more women into the
creating
trades.
A pipeline. That's actually a segue to my next question, which is two things. One, you're answering the question whereby there is an intentional effort to ensure that you have a pipeline of women who can rise through that industry and grow to the C-suite. Where are we and how well are we doing with regards to young people coming out of college and or any relationships with our Philadelphia public schools to capture the imagination of young people about transportation as a career?
Well, we have an awful lot of outreach with city high schools and colleges. We have people that are on curriculum committees. We go to job fairs. There's an awful lot of support. And in fact, in our HR department, what we did in recent years was we've been doing a lot of hiring. We have 3,000 employees at Septa with less than 5 years experience. So and we only have 9,500 total employees. So in recent years, a very, very high level of hiring because of retirements. So we took our HR department and put one person kind of in charge of further developing relationships and that pipeline, while the other person is continuing to just grind out hiring people. So it's a strategy that so far we've been able to meet our requirements for employees, but it's challenging when you have that much replacement. Basically, almost a third of the company has been replaced in 5 years.
That's huge. And so where in that strategy is there the goal to make sure that the new workforce is also diverse?
Actually, our hiring levels in recent years have higher percentages of diversity than we actually have right now overall.
Okay.
So, and it's creating a pretty dramatic trends. I mean, in one of the points here, I talked about how since 2014, we've grown, in number of employees reporting to a minority or woman has grown significantly. Just since 14, that number grew 26%.
Okay.
So a lot of people were at Septa a very, very long time, but now they're hitting retirement and things are
slowly
changing.
beginning to
And actually now they're changing pretty fast.
Okay. Lastly, at the request of Councilman Johnson, your team did a presentation to members about the expansion to King of Prussia. Can you give us an update on where that humongous opportunity is?
Well, it's a project that I really think is regional because there's so many people that work, and it's the third largest employment center in our region after Center City and University City.
Is it really?
So a lot of people,
Wow.
I think there's 65,000 jobs there. A lot of people from the city go to jobs there. They go on often on a very long trip
Yes.
on the Schuylkill Expressway. So we're really very hopeful that this project can move forward. We have funding to take it to the 15% design level. We're also, as part of that, doing an analysis of how to fund the overall project,
Yes.
which is over $1 billion. But this type of project is really, I think, great for our whole region, not
Okay.
just the Montgomery County or the city. I think it just provides great access to a region that's got a lot of jobs and is growing.
And so therefore, it will require partnerships and alliances with regional members of the Pennsylvania legislature, I would imagine, to make that real. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it most likely will qualify for federal funds.
Okay.
And so we have a lot of different options, and that's what will be looked at coming up.
Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Bass?
Chairman, good afternoon.
Good
Is it
afternoon.
Oh, good morning. It's been a long morning. So I just had a couple of questions, and I wanted to start, if we could have, let's start with Captain Estelle, if you could come forward to talk about safety, because I do have some very specific questions on the police presence on Septa, and particularly in the subway system and on the L system. If you could talk about that for a bit. One of the things that has been brought to my attention is that there is almost no police presence, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there is almost no police presence on the subway system, on the Market Frankfurt L system, and that I've been made aware of people being on the subway and on the L with tasers. And, one situation I was told about where someone got off the train and they had their pit bulls with them. Hard to believe, but there they were. And another situation where a young person, a kid leaving school, was attacked by a group of kids, and in his attempt to get away, he actually jumped in the subway system. He actually jumped onto the tracks and ran across to the other side to get away from the group that was chasing him. And he was, housed by, or protected by one of the cashiers who, sort of pulled him into the booth so that when they ran on the other side, that they couldn't get a hold of him until police were able to come. So I have some really serious concerns about Septa and the level of safety that our riders expect. When you go to New York, you thoroughly expect, like everybody rides the subway. When I go to New York, I get on the subway. There's no fear, there's no concern. But I think it's different in Philadelphia. And there's nothing I would like more than for us to have the same sort of, comfort that you could get on a SEPTA train no matter what it is, whether it's regional rail, the Market Frankfurt, the Broad Street line, and that you will be safe. So can you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure, Councilwoman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Chief Thomas Nostell, I'm the chief of the SEPTA Transit Police. Councilwoman, we have approximately 270 members of the department, and the overwhelming majority of those members are assigned to the Broad Street and Market Frankfurt line part of our system.
What number is that, would you say, roughly? 50%, 70%, 90%?
No, I would say 90%.
Of those 270 officers?
Correct. We deploy based on data-driven decision-making.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on where we have complaints of activity. We focus on information from our employees. We have a great network with the SEPTA employees who let us know about problems that are brewing, problem locations. We have our Transit Watch app that riders can communicate directly with our transit police dispatchers and let them know about locations that they see activity occurring at. During this school dismissal time, that is our most laborious time of the day. And it is also the time when we have the most number of officers working with overlap shifts and deployed throughout the Broad Street subway and the Market Frankfurt line, totally throughout Market Frankfurt and Broad Street subway during school dismissal time. You talk about comparisons of New York and Philadelphia. New York has 33,000 police officers. You know, I have less than 300. We have to focus on where the need exists and make sure that officers are present and visible to try to make people feel safe. The reality is, if we look at reported crime, violent crime in the subway system and the Market Frankfurt line is very low, very low. And I think a lot of it is a belief that crime is high. Reported crime is very low.
What's considered a violent crime?
Murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault.
So if my bag is snatched on the L, somebody grabs my bag and, you know, runs off with it.
That would be a robbery.
That is considered
Yes,
by
ma'am.
SEPTA to be a violent
Correct.
crime. And so can you give us the statistics on what those numbers look like?
Sure.
On SEPTA in the last year or so?
Yep. Councilwoman, in 2018, there was one homicide that was in Jefferson Station. You may remember that. That was overnight while the station was closed, a fight between two homeless persons, and an arrest was made. We have a report of 3 rapes. One of those rapes occurred on the Market Frankfurt line, and a transit police officer actually apprehended the person. It was nighttime, overnight, and as the train was pulling in, an officer was on that train and apprehended the person. The other 2 are still, there was also the rape on July 3rd at 10 p.m. at City Hall Station. You may remember that. There was publicity over it with a rookie police officer who actually took that report on July 3rd, and on July 4th, every police officer in the transit system had a picture of the offender, and we were looking for that offender. The same rookie police officer saw that man at 69th Street, apprehended him, and that man was armed with a gun. And the third case is still an open case, and there are some questions about the validity of the case, and that's being investigated by Philadelphia Special Victims Unit. Robberies, we have we have 26 robberies. No, I'm sorry. We have 45 robberies in 2018. And of those 45, 31 occurred on the subway or the L. And aggravated assaults, there were a total of 10. None of those aggravated assaults were serious injury incidents. They were incidents in which an object was used. You know, if you get struck with an object, regardless of the extent of the injury, that's an aggravated assault. If you get pushed into a track and sustain no injury, that would be an aggravated assault. If a person is knocked out, that would be an aggravated assault. So we had 10 aggravated assaults.
Okay, I know my time is up, so I'll come back around for my next line of questions. But I would just suggest that if these are the numbers for 2018, in terms of the number of robberies, 45 robberies and 31 of those being on the subway or on the L, and only 10 aggravated assaults, I would suggest that those numbers are probably not accurate. And not on your part, but just on people not reporting some of the things that are happening. Because, you know, like we hear about it all the time. And I can tell you probably at Broad and Olney, which is in my district, you know, I probably have had 31 assaults and robberies at 31, you know, probably since January of this year. It's out of control. We need help at Broad and Olney.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not the only location that I could point to. There's Broad and Erie, which needs a lot of help. You know, I understand that you're handcuffed, no pun intended, in terms of the number of staff that you have. But I just think that riders' safety and confidence in the system just really can't be underestimated. So, but I'll come back around. But I don't know if you want to.
Councilwoman, the reporting issue, definitely, I mean, I'm sure there are victims out there that have not reported to the police. We desperately want them to, because we have a really good chance of solving that crime because of our 26,000 cameras. And we investigate incidents that occur on the system. Yes. The transit police detectives do a really good job. They're tenacious, but those are for the incidents that we know about. We really urge people to call and report incidents that occur on the system.
Well, I've seen your camera system, and it's very impressive. And so I have no doubt that you can pick up anybody who drops a piece of gum out on the, you know, on a platform. So it's very comprehensive. So I would like to see us be able to do more to make the system safer. So thank you. I'll come back around.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Chief Nestel, while you're there, just a comment. I just want to thank you for your responsiveness all the time on some of the issues in the suburban station and around the Hub of Hope. I know that's a challenge. I think it's been a success, the Hub of Hope, but obviously there's been some other issues that come out of it. And I know you try to work with the businesses down there that sometimes get frustrated. So
Thanks,
I appreciate
Councilman. I'm a big fan of the Hub of Hope. I think they do great work.
Yes.
And they've been a tremendous resource for us.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Gim?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Mr. Knuppel. Thanks for being here. I also want to reiterate my appreciation for Septa's partnership with the Hub of Hope. Also, your partnership with the Vision Zero commitment to sustainability in particular. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that as well. And I've definitely been appreciative of the work that you've done with Mike Carroll and others on the Connect Transit Executive Committee. I think that's been an important effort to move transit and infrastructure and the mobility of our city. And a lot of that starts with an openness to dialogue. So one of the areas that I know that I've tried to talk through a little bit has been about how the largest share of SEPTA's ridership relies on comes mostly from low-income residents in our city. And I've long thought of transit as a public good, in which low-income Philadelphians should be able to access transit or not have to spend more proportionally than our wealthiest folks to be able to ride it. And we certainly know that cities around the country are piloting a number of programs to make those transit affordability to become a priority. everything from fare capping and reduced transit for youth and those kinds of things. But I did want to zero in a little bit on transfers, because transfer fees, because I know that that's been an ongoing point of discussion, both with the city as well as with Septa. So could you give me an update on where we think transfer fees are and whether Septa plans to continue them in its current format, or are we working to alleviate some of the burdens that we're going to have for people being able to access the same location from any part of the city? You know?
We understand that transfers are an issue, and that's something we're looking at. There's a lot of fare policy issues that we're grappling with right now. We talked about that earlier. And, you know, the one thing is, though, that we have to figure out how to make it neutral in terms of cost. But this is something that we will be looking at as we are adjusting our fare policy, and it's probably in the next year that we'll really be looking at that issue as we have to get ready for our next fare increase. So all of that is being reviewed now. We do understand it, but it does create a situation for us in that we want it to be neutral in terms of cost to Septa, because if we lose income, we have to reduce service, and we don't want to do that.
Right. And how much money do you bring in through transfer fees?
12 million? 12 million.
Okay. Could you clarify that? If you could just repeat it for the record.
$12 million, 12 million transfers.
12 million transfers, okay. Mike, I know you came up. I didn't know if you could share a little bit about what the city position is in terms of transfer fees, and whether people who are coming, who get the straight line in from University City can do the transfer at 30th Street, should only have to pay one fare, whereas someone from the Northeast or Wynwood, Overbrook, trying to get into a job in Center City might have to pay significantly more for the same access to the same location.
Yeah, so we've been very clear in our discussions with Septa around the work that needs to be done for the bus network optimization, that that work will pay off the most if there's no transfer fee, because that way the network gets to work as a network, and so users get, like you were suggesting, access to the whole city once they're in the system, and it makes it easier for the routes to be organized in a way that supports, more mobility, more access to more of the city. But I am fully aware of the constraints that SEPTA is talking about, and so as we do all of this work, we need to make sure that we've got the best data available. And, what we're hearing and very excited about is that the key system that's been introduced is actually giving us a lot of granular data about the ways that people use more of the system to get around. So I'm convinced that we will find an ability to reduce and potentially eliminate the transfer fee, but it's going to take work from the city and from SEPTA to really think through what the network looks like, and also, as the general manager said, what the true revenue implications are in a comprehensive way.
Yeah. And do you have a timeline on that? Because I know we've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, it's going on over the next year and a half, really. That's when we'll, right? For our next fare increase, which is not this year, but the following year.
Mm-hmm. So you would time any kind of decision about transfer fees in relation to an assumed fare increase?
Yes.
As opposed to something else? I mean, is it solely, one of the reasons why I bring it up is because, SEPTA has brought up the concern about declining ridership, which is down for the fourth straight year, even though our population is actually increasing. And, as our population grows, and with the 80% of the ridership coming in from Philadelphia, and with much of it being low income, and as you're competing with rideshare and other things, which will get people faster, more direct, and potentially, in some locations, potentially cheaper than what SEPTA can offer. It seems like this isn't just about, if we can eliminate transfer fees but raise fares overall. It is about stopping the significant decline in ridership and making sure that we're reversing a trend that seems to be like not only persistent, but potentially could grow in terms of a gap. So, you know, affordability seems to be a core aspect. It's certainly what I hear. I'm interested in like whether, I know SEPTA used to allow children to ride for free on weekends. And I'm interested in whether, one, are you planning any ability to offer that again? I'm a big believer that youth should ride for free on SEPTA, not only because it makes sense for families, but because you build lifelong riders when they're very young. My son, now to my dismay a bit because he's like 19, does not have a driver's license because he's grown up on SEPTA all his life. But, you know, does not feel compelled because he believes he can get around in the city. But I think it's like, you know, one of these things where, you know, I'm curious about whether you're looking at other types of things to relieve the financial cost on the residents who need SEPTA the most, use it the most, and are likely to teach their children and families to keep becoming lifelong riders.
Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director.
Oh, no, you didn't have to, okay.
Okay, yeah, I just jump in a little bit and, you know, try and echo, but also reframe a little bit of the comments you've made. What the city, the administration is trying to do is to work with SEPTA to take kind of a systems approach to the way that we're looking at transit in Philadelphia. And I think we've had a lot of success. I mean, we've had individual projects that we've pulled off kind of taking this frame, but also the fact that SEPTA's working to do this type of optimization is really a result of several years of engagement that we've had with them. And I think there's certainly more work to do, but what we're hopeful is that you know, coming into this next year on the city side, we're going to do some very specific transit planning, and we're calling it the City of Philadelphia Transit Plan, which packages together kind of as best we can reasonable asks for SEPTA to provide the best service possible for all Philadelphians. So all of the things that you're talking about, I think, get put into that basket. And then in working with SEPTA, the next question is how do we make that happen? How do we implement that? And it's often easy to say, well, you know, if you push this button, then this is the result. And if you push that button, there's a different result. But people don't always think about if you push both buttons, what is the comprehensive outcome of those things? And that takes a fair amount of analysis. And we just haven't done that. I mean, the city hasn't done it for the city's interest, and SEPTA hasn't really done it in terms of what's the impact on service is, the impact on their
So you're saying that
investments.
you've never done a study about the relationship of affordability to ridership and the impact on ridership decline or anything like that?
Not comprehensively. So we've started doing that, and so the work that was done in the Choices Report gives us a lot of really important clues about how those changes would impact both ridership, and to some extent you can interpret affordability and you can interpret the revenue impacts, but that work needs to take place, and we feel like if we do all of it at once, we'll see how things dovetail. We'll see how you get win-win situations, and that, I think, gets us to the point where we're saying, okay, well, we can make changes in the revenue structure or the fare collection structure, and maybe they don't have a one-to-one impact in revenue because you're seeing the ridership go up over time. But that's the kind of dialogue that on the city side we've taken on for ourselves to package together a lot of that, how it works in Philadelphia, you know, the city and county of Philadelphia, and then bring that to SEPTA as they're working on their optimization work so they can incorporate that into their plan for what the service looks like.
Yep, and I'll come back around to the next round, but I just want to note that there are certain things that I don't think we have to spend a ton of time unpacking. We're the poorest large city in the country. We have 40% of our kids live in abject poverty. Many of them are born into it. They're paying fares to ride SEPTA, to get around, you know, like they're being asked for their families to do it. 80% of our ridership is within our city, and ridership is declining. So, like, there are certain things that we should be working on. I'm happy to talk about a systems-based approach. I think that those things are important. I think it's things that we've been around the table with. But we have to talk about a needs-based approach that is based on a broader citywide understanding of need, and SEPTA as a public good, as much as it is, like, it's not its own fiefdom in terms of, like, having its own world. It is deeply related to not only the city's growth and mobility and our future, but it's also related to our regional. So like, I don't want it to be a conversation in which, like, you know, conversations about low-income residents or, you know, like fare capping and, you know, income-based fares is some kind of isolated discussion separate from the other systems.
That's right.
I do think it's like part and parcel, and we should continue to explore that. I don't want us to be afraid of the conversation, or that somehow a depletion on one end automatically means SEPTA tanks, you know, like financially. That's not always the case,
Right.
you know? So investments can be seen not as charitable, but as actually an investment in ridership and expansion. So I hope that that's part of what we can talk about on the,
All right,
on the
Councilwoman,
next
if we
round.
could.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me just start by saying good morning to each of you. Let me start where I have with most departments and saying a special thank you, Jeff, to the team. I don't care if we're talking about the revitalization of the Longcrest Lawndale site, which your team came up and participated in several community meetings so that residents could talk about the entrance, the lighting, the aesthetic appeal. Your team was very patient, and we're very pleased about that. In addition to that, help refresh my memory. What was the name of the event that I attended at SEPTA? It was probably about 6 to 8 months ago, maybe. It was some sort of recruitment, diversity and inclusion recruitment.
It was a Women in the Trades event that we had for recruiting.
So let me just state on the record, because had you not organized an activity like that to promote the need proactively to increase the number of women who have access to the opportunity to participate in trades relative to SEPTA, we would probably be talking about it today, but you did it and you were proactive, and I want to say thank you. With that in mind, I want you to talk to me about this post-Act 89 activity, and I did not realize how much it actually assisted and adds value in our region. And obviously I feel a tad bit married to Act 89 because we fought very hard in Harrisburg for that. And you have it here in your brochure. Could you just give an overview about what that was?
Well, since Act 89, our overall economic impact across the state even is over $3 billion, with 23,000 jobs and $1.7 billion in earnings. So direct, indirect, and induced spending have all been, you know, a result. I think we've had over $300 million in contracts to Philadelphia companies.
Over 300 million?
Yeah.
Is that a record number for SEPTA?
Sure.
Okay.
Since Act 89 passage, yes. And really, we've been able to, you know, we talk about ridership declines, but the rail modes have been very, very strong in their ridership, and we've been able to invest in the rail modes to keep them going. And, you know, people talk about what we lost Amazon. Well, we still grew in Amazon in the number of jobs since 2010. We've also grown in population. We can show direct relationships, too, to where most of the commercial and residential construction permits are. They're along SEPTA. And that's where, you know, a lot of activity is happening. So, you know, whether it's total economic impact, companies even in the Philadelphia region, driving economic development, there's all kinds of good things that have been happening out of Act 89.
So when you just described where permits are being pulled in its close proximity to where our rail lines and or Broad Street line is, you're describing what many in the industry call like transit-oriented development.
Absolutely, yeah.
So with that in mind, and Councilwoman Cindy Bass and I, we share the Broad and Olney commercial corridor. She has one side of the street. I have the other side. We are working on a major advancement relative to improving from lighting, security cameras, signage, for what Broughton Olney looks like, because while we know we have a lot of challenges there, it is actually the hub from the burbs that people who are taking the Broad Street line when they either get on at Fern Rock and or at Broad and Olney. I want you, if you will, I know what we did in Lawndale, to describe some of the investments that SEPTA has made and will continue to make along the Broad Street line in particular.
Okay, well, I can talk about both Broad and Olney and Fern Rock. For Broad and Olney, we have a pretty good setup there that was probably rebuilt in the early 90s. And what we've done is every single year, I started it, we have a maintenance blitz of Olney. So we come in and make sure that it's always in good condition. So every single year, for over 20 years, we bring in a whole list of our workforce and make sure that painting, everything, cleaning, everything is really in good shape. So, you know, we're certainly willing to partner more at Olney. You know, we'll be ready again now for the Broad Street run coming up this weekend. But we always try to keep Broad and Olney in a very good state of good repair, and certainly can partner more. At Fern Rock, at the end of the line, there's been a study by DVRPC about building kind of a bigger transportation center there. That's something that's still in the outer years of our capital program, but is something that, you know, we are working on.
Well, let me just note for the record, particularly to the residents who live in that region, I again want to thank you and your team for the record. We started in 2016 on working on an economic development plan to enhance all neighborhood commercial corridors in the 9th Councilmatic District, because we wanted to make sure the plan was driven from the ground up. That is, residents who live in those areas were able to tell us what they wanted to see in their areas. I am happy to note that SEPTA has played an integral role during our stakeholder meetings and meetings with the community. And so we very much look forward to working with you and fast-tracking as much as we possibly can all of the aesthetic improvements that we are hoping to see, to even on top of the investments that you've already made, and I'll come back during the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Dom, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few more questions I wanted to ask. Do you have an idea of the time it takes to go from 69th Street on the Market Frankfurt L to City Hall?
Under 20 minutes, I believe. 15.
15. And how about the Frankfurt Transportation Center to City Hall?
24.
How about Fern Rock to City Hall?
Well, that's amazing. If you're on an express, how fast is that? 12, 13 minutes. That's I love that trip on the express train.
I guess my point is that it never hurts to market that, because those are amazing statistics. I remember hearing, I think from, I just saw Harold Epps walk in the room, our Director of Commerce. I think he told me, I could be wrong about this, when we were looking at Amazon, when they went out to Seattle, we have like 3 times the mass transit than Seattle has. And that's a huge asset for us. So when we're seeing all this congestion in the city, I just want to make sure we're getting that word out, how efficient you're operating this system and how quickly you can get to places using those lines and buses and others. But those are amazing. I mean, from 69th Street into City Hall, and would you say 12 minutes from Fern Rock to City Hall on the Express?
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is amazing. And I don't think many cities can do that. I have another question I wanted to ask, just in general. Do SEPTA buses, do they have cameras in the buses?
Yes.
They do. And do they have cameras outside the buses?
We have a camera that looks ahead. I don't know if we... On the passenger side, we do have a camera on the outside.
Okay. And then the police, I guess, have access to that in case of any kind of issues that they need?
Our police department absolutely knows how to use cameras. It's pretty amazing.
Okay. And then I want to go back to this, I want to make sure I understand from Mike Carroll, the traffic study. If you can have it figured out yet, it's something I'd like to talk about, or like to see accomplished, really, not talk about.
Okay.
I'm hearing in the traffic study what you're talking about, but is there a comprehensive traffic study, and hear me out what I'm looking for, that takes into account all these issues going on? By the way, exponentially, the purchasing of items by residents of our city online is going to continue to increase. 25% currently are online, 10% of groceries are online. Retail demand is down because of the online purchases. That means more trucks, more deliveries, more everything, and it's going to only get exponentially worse the next year or two. You have that going on. You have bike lanes and making sure they're protected. You have buses that we want to see operate more efficiently. We have metered parking that we need to look at that maybe shouldn't be there in some locations. We have traffic lights, signage, the condition of the streets. One of my questions is there coordination of the traffic patterns when we have to fix a pothole or close a street that we post alternative? Because I can tell you how many phone calls we get that a street's closed, we took the left and that street was closed and we couldn't get there, and it seemed the public thinks we're not coordinating very well.
Yeah.
So my question is, do we going to have a comprehensive study, and not that it takes 2 years, in the next 3 or 4 months that can get this solved?
Yeah, there's no comprehensive study you can do for a city this large with that complexity of issues in 3 or 4 months. We talked about this about a year ago. Similar studies in other cities tend to be in the tens of millions of dollars and take 4 or 5 years to do. We made a conscious decision not to try and do that, and instead we were going to try and deal with the problems that were in front of us as much as possible, using shorter study processes to get information we needed. The kind of coordination issues that you're talking about, that's a day-to-day thing where we're always trying to look to improve the information systems we have. We're meeting with what we call the right-of-way users, mostly the utilities, on a monthly basis, identifying and troubleshooting issues, and just pushing the envelope ahead every chance we can. Every time we identify a problem, figure out what went wrong, figure out how we prevent that from going wrong the next time. And we've had good progress, and it may not always feel that way when you come out of a winter and you've got all the potholes and all the construction ramps up at the same time. I'm always looking for opportunities to increase our capacity to get out in the street, enforce the rules. We're looking at ways to make the rules more sensible, more transparent for people. I think we're going to make some good progress this year in terms of the regulations that we put out on the street. So it's an ongoing thing, and sometimes when you do things in an ongoing way, the improvements can sometimes seem imperceptible to people. But we're doing some studies, like I talked about. We're going to make sure that those studies are coordinated, that the findings of those studies are implemented as immediately as possible, and then they feed into the next effort that we have teed up. And so, like I say, we're going to do a fair amount of work, and we'll certainly extend an invitation to you and your staff to get involved in this data information work we're doing, because I think that that's a real crux of the issue. We don't always have a good grasp of what's going on. We rely on anecdotes a little bit too much. The data that we do have isn't all integrated and fused for decision making. So getting a handle on that, I think, tells us more what we can do in a 2, 3, 4 month period to make bigger improvements that are more perceptible to people.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Bass.
I wanted to go back to my conversation about safety and crime, because I had a few more questions on that. And my question was around bus operators, and because they are sort of like on the front lines. They're not protected, behind any sort of glass partition or whatever. There is, I think, a thought or a feeling that there have been a number of attacks, or that overall attacks against bus operators are on the rise. And so can you speak to that and what the statistics may say about that?
We are seeing an increase in incidents, or what we call anything where the operator is made uncomfortable, or we call it all an assault. So we kind of go in that most severe direction in how we categorize it. It doesn't take much to be called what we call a bus operator assault. And we have seen numbers rising, but they are typically not the physical type assaults. It's spitting, it's water being thrown, or things like that. It's very, very upsetting that our operators go through this. In recent years, I decided to put shields on the buses. So far this calendar year, we haven't had any incidents on a bus where the shield was in place. And
how many buses have the shield in place?
We have about 500, but of our 1,400, but we will probably, we're working to have about 80% of our buses covered with a shield by the end of the calendar year. So we're pushing hard to have the shields. But that's not the only thing. The cameras are very helpful with us. The police respond, not just, our own Septa police, not Philly police, but our own Septa police are out there. And they follow the situation all the way through, especially if there is any court proceedings. Our police follow all the way through. We've really done a lot of things also to train our operators on how to de-escalate tough situations. But it is very upsetting to me that we continue to have an increase in these incidents of really. It's unfortunate that our drivers have to go through things like water and being spit on.
Yeah, I would agree. Can you tell us what the change has been from what to what when you say there's an increase? From 500 incidents to 1,000 incidents, from 200 incidents?
It's about I'm talking right now this year, we're double the rate of last year, but that's
significant, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking typically about 100 incidents a year. But if this goes the way this year seems to be going, we could end up higher. However, at the same time as we're installing all these shields, that may help the rest of the backside of the calendar year. So it's hard to say yet.
So right now, where are you? So you had 100 last year. Are you at 200 this year? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think we'll hit that because of the shields that we're installing at a very rapid rate. But right now, for the first quarter, we are seeing, I think, on the order of twice as many incidents, albeit they're mostly, spitting and throwing of liquids.
Yeah, Councilwoman,
yes.
While we call them assaults, they are not assaults according to the Crimes Code. They are, internally, we call them incidents of disrespect. The amount of negative contact directed towards our operators is awful, but not rising to the level where they're attacked. Spit upon, cups thrown at them, objects thrown at them, it's distressing.
Well, I would agree. And as someone, as I believe you know, Captain, that I have a close relative who is was a bus operator for many, many years here in the city of Philadelphia, and who was attacked, who was robbed, who was threatened, who went through the whole gamut of things that you could imagine that a person will go through, except that they shouldn't have to go through that. They're in the workplace, and they should not have to be subject to these sorts of things. So I think if there's a way to speed up the timeline in terms of providing that protective barrier, although I don't even know how much protection it really will provide, because now you feel like you're sort of encapsulated or locked into this tiny space.
We made it optional because it is a split percentage. Almost 50-50 of our operators like having the shield, some don't. But by making it optional, they're actually making the choice based on the time of day.
Right.
All kinds of issues, can enter into whether they're deciding to pull the shield across or not. Like I said, so far though, this year we have not had an incident where we had a shield on a bus. So I know it's not going to fix everything, but it is helping. This is an issue that we all pay an immense amount of time to. We pulled the number way down. So if anything, we're getting back up to what numbers we had before. But that's not acceptable, so we went and really have pushed the shield along in construction.
Well, I would just say that, like the worker safety is just paramount. I mean, if folks feel that they can get on a bus and attack a bus driver, that's going to affect your productivity, your ability to perform a service that we greatly need you to perform here in the city. And so, worker safety is critical. And although I get it with the partition, but at the same time, what about everybody else on the other side of the partition who still has to deal with someone who may be really angry, nasty, violent, threatening? There's no level of protection for them. So just
We're even in recent years have posted rewards for if there are any serious crimes committed on the bus, that we will provide a cash reward if people help us catch the individual or individuals. So we're constantly working on this. This is one of our big priorities.
Okay. I will come back around because that bell rings awfully quick. Thank you.
Councilwoman Kim.
Thank you very much. So I had a couple of, I think, mainly questions that we get a lot from constituents. One of them is about, we have retailers now selling Septa keys. And I know that the contract does not, I think we've talked about this before, that contract does not allow retailers to profit from the selling of Septa keys. But we still hear that reports that retailers are charging reload fees. Are you proactively surveying whether retailers are doing actively doing practices like this? Have you stopped some from doing?
We absolutely have. We've gone out and we continue to go out even now and checking to see if there are those kind of fees. And then if we do not have a good feeling about the vendor, we're getting rid of them out of the network.
Okay. And then if there is a complaint about a reload fee, what would a consumer be able to do, at the, when they're talking to the retailer that's selling them they can just say, you can't charge us that, or?
I mean, how they could report it, we have all of our normal customer service reporting hotlines will come to us with that kind of information, and we will investigate, especially if we get a report, we'll investigate immediately.
Great. Okay, thank you. We talked a little bit about how Septa used to offer discounted fares or free rides for children on weekends. For caregivers in our city, is that accurate? For caregivers in our city, that would relieve a huge burden, and I'm wondering.
I'm not aware of that. We
of that
did
program.
That. Are you guys? No, we're not aware of ever.
So you haven't offered of.
Not that we can recall. I have 31, he has almost 40, so we don't, years. Okay. We don't recall that.
Okay. So we can maybe follow up with you on that at a different point in time. Our immigrant and ELL, new Philadelphians are heavily reliant on Septa, and I know the website is in English only. Is there any effort to are we trying to look at language access on that website, or what's the possibility of doing language access on the website?
Our website's 14 languages, and one of the things that we've done in recent years especially is we now have a person in charge of working with the Hispanic community. That's a position at Septa that's going very, very well. So we get it that we need to start, and we are expanding the amount of languages and ways you get information. In fact, I think even on the L and the Broad Street subway now that many of our messages are in Spanish as well as English.
Okay. That's helpful to know. So the website is translatable
Yes.
in 14 different languages. Thank you very much. And one other question that I had was about emergency detours, and for individuals, particularly ones who struggle with mobility issues, having concerns about when a bus is detoured, that they're not always aware of that when they get on the bus. So like at the point that the bus starts to detour, then they're being made aware that the bus is being detoured. But we've had situations where someone may, like for example, be in South Philadelphia, the bus normally goes down to, 17th Street, they live at, 19th or 20th, and then, they're going down, being detoured down to Broad, and, it's a wheelchair or it's something another on those lines, and now instead of a small block walk, it's a significant one. So what can be done to better address this issue and provide some advance notice about detours?
There is an increasing number of detours in the last few years. We've been working on the city with this because it does affect our customers, especially the ones, like you say, they're almost kind of instantaneous.
Right.
What typically I think would be the best approach is obviously to report that to the driver. The driver will report that back to our control center, and in many cases I think we would try to get the person to as close as they could before, either through our CCT service or through one of our managers. I think some of our buses are accessible. Vans. We have vans that we can pick people up as well with our managers. So I think we're able to often help, but the best thing that they can do is make it aware to the driver. The other thing that we've been doing is literally some of the different Liberty Resources, Adapt, and all. We're feeding information on detours to them immediately.
There isn't a sign, though, that could be put right on the box when someone gets onto a bus, where the payment slot is, and just say, hey, this bus is being detoured, like that's, so that it doesn't have to be the responsibility of the rider to proactively find that out. But if the bus is being detoured, we already know that it's going to be detoured. Could there not be just a sign that the bus is being detoured? If you have a problem, ask a question. Or
that sounds like something we can work on.
It just seems like for residents that struggle with mobility and with children in particular,
they don't realize.
Especially high schoolers.
I mean,
we
I
don't know.
We put a lot of stuff out on social media and alerts and all that. But I get it, that somebody still might not be paying attention, goes to the bus stop, and then they don't realize.
I think it's mostly the buses that would really help.
We can work on something about that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Do you have an opinion on whether the city should be looking at, at one point Chestnut Street was closed to traffic and it was a bus-only street. Does Septa have an opinion on whether the city should explore that as a possibility and how it would improve service?
The answer is that whatever works kind of globally for the network, we're in favor of. How we get there, for faster service for us. There's all kinds of ways from you can have devices that hold the lights for us. You can have there's all kinds of ways. Better coordination of traffic lights, which is what Mike's been talking about with improved infrastructure. However we get there, we do need to make our bus network faster. People are looking for, they want the service to keep them moving, whether they're, and also with how long they wait for a stop for the bus. So one of the things that we've done now is market, we have our 15-15-5 map that we came out to show the high frequency routes to our customers and kind of market those routes that come by more frequently. But maybe Mike, you want to talk a little bit more about things like Chestnut Street and where the city's thinking.
Yeah, so we're definitely interested in exploring the possibilities for both bus-only lanes or bus-only corridors and what we call business access and transit lanes or BAT lanes, which allows for people to use them for right turns in and out of driveways and so forth. And so right now, actively, For bat lanes, we're looking at the Roosevelt Boulevard, working with PennDOT and the team that's working on the Boulevard Multimodal Program. And yeah, we've been hearing a lot of the conversation about Chestnut, so we haven't started doing any work to explore that, but at least conceptually, we're trying to think about how that would work with the rest of the work that Septa is looking at doing. So again, this is a kind of a topic that within the city's transit plan, we're probably going to be able to take on and get some dialogue around. So it'll be interesting to see how folks along the corridor who have businesses and the residents feel about that. That'll be a big factor.
And then just a point of clarification, when was the last time that that Chestnut Street was a bus-only lane? Do you remember? I remember when it was. I don't remember the date, but I remember when it was.
I'm going to say it was...
Early 90s.
Yeah, that'll work.
I'm sorry?
90.
Early 90s.
Early 90s. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Parker?
Mr. Chairman, I want to go back to an issue we touched on earlier, and that's the issue of diversity and inclusion. So first, if you've already answered this question, I apologize for not hearing the answer. How many employees does SEPTA have?
9,500.
9,500, and this is across the board from the executive team along with drivers, police, and the whole bit, 9,500.
The whole thing.
Okay. On the executive side, again, you heard me laud you all for making sure that you went above and beyond the call of duty to provide access to information about how women, often underrepresented in the trades, can get access to an opportunity to get those good paying jobs. Tell me about the diversity of the executive team. How many members of your executive team are there?
Ooh. Well, I can tell you that 5 years ago, women and minorities made up 52% of SEPTA's management employees. Today, that number is 59%. Also, in really dramatic fashion, we've been seeing changes. Since 2014, we only had 26% of our employees reporting to a minority or a woman, but now that number's up to 45% in just a couple years. So there's a...
just help me to understand. So approximately 45%?
Report to a minority or a woman supervisor.
Okay.
And that is up from 26% in 2014. So SEPTA is undergoing a very, very rapid change. We have 3,000 employees less than 5 years of service. So we've had an awful lot of retirements, and what's coming behind is a very diverse workforce. The numbers are higher than our averages right now for hiring over the last couple years. And in terms of opportunities in management, that is really changing as well, very fast. It's a company where we still had, a pension, and so employees stay a very long time.
And keep that pension. Yeah. Workers deserve and need that pension.
So the employees stay a long time, but now that's changing. Just like many companies, we have a lot of retirements going on. And we're seeing, a really strong trend for diversity as we go forward.
So tell me, so for example, because people do stay at SEPTA, because if you get there, it's a good job that provides more than a living wage for its workers. And I think I really want to know the answer to this question, because I want to see if there are any strategies and techniques that you all have been employing that we can pay attention to here. I'm talking about the city of Philadelphia, versus opportunities for people to move up the ranks. So one of the things I've always said about you is that I appreciate that you worked your way through the ranks. So it's not many jobs that people do at SEPTA that you don't know how it impacts them because you worked your way through the ranks. What is that like for SEPTA employees in trying to help to raise them up so that they can actually make it to the management level?
Well, as general manager, I have really pushed very hard on not just hiring, but retention. If you get into a problem of retention, and many companies are today, it can be very hard to keep enough employees around, especially, bus drivers, everything, to keep all that going, especially when you invest employees like an engineer on the railroad, could be 9 months to a year. You don't want them leaving after 2 years. So I have been leading something kind of modeling the way so that my entire organization understands how important retention is. I have my own employee engagement program that I do. I go out and I shadow our employees. I do usually 1 or 2 shadowing events a quarter. I love doing that. I've even spent up to my longest shadow was 11 hours with a Route 52 bus driver till after midnight, who I still talk to. He's a great guy. But all these kind of things. I have breakfast with our employees, both management and hourly. We just, my GM team, our staff meetings go out to locations. So, keeping communication going is very, very important. Another thing that we've instituted recently is having kind of job fairs for our own people.
So for those who actually work there already.
We go to a bus location and talk to them about moving into management, because for some of them, it's kind of the type of thing that they have apprehensions, they have questions, and so we go out, we help them prepare, we tell them what kind of questions to expect, what kind of areas if they could improve, certain skills. If we see areas that they might not have enough skills in, we work with them on that. So there's just a whole lot of things going on. I'm also meeting, and have been over this last year, with all 2,000 of my managers in groups of about 100. So I've had 20. We're about, I think we're on meeting next week is 14. We'll have about 20, 25 of those meetings, where I'm really talking about 2 things, where I'm talking about the competition with my managers. One, we're in competition for customers, and that's a big deal now today with people and with all the options they have. And the other is that we're in a competition for employees. Mm-hmm. And that with unemployment so low and all, that we have to make sure that we're really engaging and having workforce that feels satisfied and supported in their jobs. So these are things
I want you
important.
to know that that 45% number reporting to minority and or women supervisors is impressive. And I'm always going to be keeping my eye on opportunities for advancement within the team for people of color as it relates to making it to the very top executive level. And I've heard the beat, Mr. Chairman, but my final question is in regards to a Pew report that came out in October of 2018, and it talked about the number of Philadelphians who are reverse commuting from Philadelphia to the suburbs. That number was 39%. Last year, Chairman Greenlee, myself, and several others, we worked very closely with PUP to get a line item in the budget that could help fund some vans where they help to take people to jobs, in the burbs where Septa currently doesn't have a route. So I guess my question to you is, have we explored that, like what ridership is like and sort of where jobs are located, and does that King of Prussia, what is it called, the rail line?
Extension,
the King of Prussia extension, like how does that correlate with that reverse commute trend? And ultimately, Councilman Dom, you're right, we want those jobs here in Philadelphia. We don't want Philadelphians having to leave to go to the suburbs to work. But I will argue, I want them to go anywhere they have to right now where there is a job so that they can afford to pay the mortgages and rents here in our city. So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, the Norristown Extension project is definitely one about access to jobs. We've looked at what it's like for the people that go to those jobs in that area, and there's 65,000 jobs there. It's the 3rd largest employment center in our region after Center City and University City. And it's very unreliable. The trip that you can take is all over the place because you're traveling on the Schuylkill Expressway. So to be able to substitute a ride on the Market Frankfurt line and then take the Norristown high-speed line out to King of Prussia is a great ability to make jobs more accessible to people. And you know, even from a farther distance, because once it becomes a reliable commute, we've looked at it, and the commute time would be kind of the same all the way from what it is today. You could now go from FTC all the way out to the King of Prussia in a time period of like what it takes now from going from 12th and Market. So by having a reliable, faster service, you'll be able to come all the way from the east end of the city to go up there in a similar amount of time to what it is today.
Well, I just want to make sure that we do, as a team, you all keep that reverse commute issue in mind as you think about different transit routes, the wheres and the hows, because until we are able to, Councilman Dom, create enough jobs here in our city of Philadelphia, our people are still reverse commuting, and we need to make sure that they have a way to get there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Just for your information, the money that was put in the budget last year finally got to PUP, I think just a few weeks ago.
And it passes
that wasn't
through.
Septa's fault. That wasn't Septa's fault.
And it passes through Septa, so we're...
Yeah, but it did get eventually through. But the money that was in for this year been taken out by the administration, so it's one of the dances we're going to have to go through to get back in again. But we're going to get back in. Okay. Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you again. Just a quick question. And going back to crime and safety one more time. So, knowing what we know, that assaults against workers are up, and that we have the partition in place, which is a protective barrier, and that's a good thing. And overall, there feels to be not the significant level of police presence that I think that we would all like for it to be. And Chief Nistel, I know you mentioned that there were 270 transit police officers compared to New York City, which has something like 33,000, I think you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Are those New York City police officers,
everyone.
or are they?
That's New York City Police Department covers the
So they cover
subway
the transit system.
Correct.
So it's kind of hard to compare. It's not really
apples
apples
and
to
oranges,
apples.
yeah.
It's not really apples to apples. I understand. But my question is have we thought about what would it take? What does it require to have the level of police presence on our, on our transit system, period? What would it require to make that happen in terms of the numbers of officers and the amount that is required? Because I think that before we can seriously look at the problem in terms of solving it, we have to have some sense of an idea of what the scope of the problem is.
Councilwoman, I think it's less about more police officers and more about marketing the product that we provide. If you look at the numbers, the reported numbers, crime is not high in the Septa system. So while everyone who rides the system would love to see a police officer on every train, that's just not economically feasible. Mm-hmm. And it's even beyond economics, it's difficult to get police officers. I'm budgeted for a number that I can't reach.
What number is that?
283.
Okay, so we're short. We're short.
I'm below my budgeted number.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to fill positions for police officers. I think what we have to do is a better marketing of how safe the system really is. Mm-hmm. When we talk about operator assaults, I sort of cringe because they're not assaults. Mm-hmm. We have not had an operator hospitalized, and I know in 2018, not one operator was hospitalized. When we talk about violent...
But attacked without requiring hospitalization? They're two different things. I just want to be clear about what we're saying here. No offensive action towards an employee of transit is acceptable. Right.
But what concerns me is making a police response to an issue that is not a police issue. We're looking at alternative methods to address some of the problems that affect safety. For instance, mental health. There is no denying that we have a mental health crisis in Philadelphia. That's what makes people feel unsafe. It doesn't necessarily, it may not correlate to real physical conflict or injuries, but it makes people feel unsafe. Septa has hired a mental health specialist, and we're looking at enhancing the program. To have mental health workers actually dealing with folks instead of police officers. And by doing that, we start to make people feel safer. We have our mental health outreach team wearing Septa vests, saying Septa outreach. I think that what I have to do more of is marketing the success that we're having to counter that perception.
Well, let me just say, I agree. I think that having conversation about what can be done, what tools are already in the toolbox that folks can use, I think that that's important. But I also think that the perception becomes a reality. And so if people perceive a transit system as being unsafe, if they don't feel comfortable, then they're never even going to get on there. So how do we deal with the perception, I guess? And I think that a more robust presence could be something that could be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. And one last question. We know that, we have a significant drug or addiction problem here in the city of Philadelphia. Can you talk about the number of overdoses on Septa buses, trains, facilities? Because we know that there is a number that's associated with that. People don't necessarily think of an overdose happening on a Septa bus or on a train or whatever, but it is happening, and I think it's happening at an alarming number. So can you talk about that?
Sure. The Septa system is disrupted by a drug overdose every day. Every day. The transit police alone have administered 390 doses of Narcan. It is...
Over what period of time?
I'm sorry?
Over what period of time?
In 2018. It is a problem that doesn't just affect the city, it affects businesses in the city and the transit authority for sure. We have a grant program where we're training officers to do warm handoffs to rehab. We're engaging an organization to assist us in reaching folks who, before they have an overdose, who are showing the signs of drug addiction, to get them into rehab. Again, another alternative to a police officer in uniform, and using social services through Septa and as a part of the transit police department to try to affect positive results.
Okay. And I want to again thank you for the work that you all do. I know it's not easy, and it's quite challenging. In particular, I want to thank you for recognizing that we do have a mental health crisis. We have a lot of mental health issues here in the city of Philadelphia, and particularly when Septa went on strike. Or Septa police, you turned around, looked at me real quick. Septa police said, get it right. When the Septa police, were on strike for a few days, not that long ago. And I believe at Suburban Station, there was a lot of concern, a lot of issues that were happening. And a lot of them really did require a mental health professional approach to it rather than a police approach. And that's when I think a lot of people really became aware of how widespread it is. So I just wanted to thank you for that as well. And I would still like to encourage Septa to try to come up with that number in terms of what would make the city of Philadelphia, what would make transit riders feel safer getting on any of our transit lines. And I think maybe having a survey of your ridership is a first step. How do they feel about it? Do they feel safe and comfortable when they're on the transit line? Because, they're the ones who could speak to it the best. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Gim?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. So is your website, when you say it's has 14 different languages, is that using Google Translate?
Yes.
It's
Please identify yourself.
Richard Burnfield, Treasurer. The Septa website uses Google Translate that has over 100 different languages that are translated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and just for note, we had a big discussion with our school district, which moved from a fully translatable website that they did in-house versus Google Translate, which misinterpreted a uniform policy as putting underwear on over your clothes. So there's a lot of problems within Google Translate that is simply non-functioning for many, many different languages. Particularly, we found it in Asian languages, and Arabic has a lot of problems in terms of accuracy around translation. And also, to be clear, is the Septa Key website also language accessible?
It has 14 different languages. The Septa Key website
also uses Google Translate, though?
It doesn't use doesn't use Google Translate, but it has 14 different languages.
Okay. All right, we will take a look at that. And then could I just ask for clarification around fares? So if the price for a child for transit fares within the city, so this is bus, trolley, subway, is you charge children, if you're a caretaker with children 4 and under, only 2, then they travel for free, is that right? But as soon as they're over the age of 4, they're paying full fare?
That's correct.
Okay. And then on your regional rail, you charge, the same applies for 2 children under the age of 4 are free, is that correct? Up to 2 children. But if they are 5 to 11, they get a discount?
I'd have to check.
I think I'm looking at on your website. So it's a 50% discount on a ticket purchase ahead of time, or it's a weekday fare for children ages 5 to 11. Is that accurate? Does that sound right to you?
I would assume so.
Is there a reason why you offer discounted fares for children ages 5 to 11 for regional rail, but don't offer it for young people who ride buses, subways, or trolleys, and our, I guess it would be Norristown high-speed line?
The fares are much higher on regional rail, but we'd have to look at that as part of a future fare policy issue.
Would that be something that we could discuss a little sooner than future? I mean, it seems like it would be comparable, like if you offer discounted fares for children, recognizing no matter what the amount is, you would want it to be consistent inside the city as you would it for anyone who travels on regional rail, for example.
As part of next year's fare increase, we're going to be looking at our fares in a very comprehensive manner. And I think that would be a good time to look at that. We certainly can start the discussions and conversations now.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a fairness aspect, it's not related to a fare increase. It's that we would like to recognize that if children are treated on regional rail in a particular way, why would they be treated differently inside on city bus lines? Is that a fair question?
Certainly willing to have that conversation.
Be continued. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Bass?
Thank you. So a couple of other questions I have. And if you could talk a little bit about, and I know you talked about it before, the new system. And so in a minute, the system is no longer going to be accepting cash at a number of stations, I believe. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
All of our stations accept cash. We have kiosks at all of our stations, Market Frankfurt, Broad Street.
Right, but is the plan soon to be that there will no longer be a person there to accept cash, but that everything would have to go through the kiosk?
Yes, the cashiers
will be there.
A person will continue to be there. They will no longer function as a cashier. They will be a customer service attendant.
So they won't be able to accept cash?
they will be able to work with our customers so they can use cash at a kiosk.
Okay, okay. There's been a number of issues with the kiosks already, as you know, and they're often down. What's the percentage of time, throughout the day that the system is off, or do you have that information?
We've been doing a number of software drops virtually every month to improve their performance. Over the last month, they have been performing with 99% reliability.
That the kiosks have been performing?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, all right. I've again, been receiving information that says something very different, that the kiosks are often down and that, that they're still getting the kinks out of the system. And it would be great if we had some sort of a sense in terms of a projected time frame for getting the kinks out of the system for the kiosks. But you're saying that there's really nothing to fix.
Well, we have been working over time. Certainly there have been issues as we have rolled out Septa Key over the last 3 years, but we've been working to improve the performance both of the kiosks and also the validators on the buses.
Okay, all right. Can we talk about Nicetown and the power generator that's gone into Nicetown, which, we've been on record saying that we have great concern about, this generator going at this location. Originally, when we met with Septa, we were told that it was going in this location because it was going to help suburban ridership. And, obviously that's, quite a concern, quite offensive, that we would put a power generator in a neighborhood that is dealing with environmental issues and struggling and has the highest asthma rate in the city of Philadelphia. And overall, the property itself, Septa has not done a great job of maintaining that parcel of real estate that you own. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to that, because that's something that we've been, arguing and fussing and fighting and talking to Septa about for at least 2 or 3 years now, and maybe even longer than that. And we really just haven't gotten any change in terms of what's been happening with Septa, at least to show the community that there is enough care that you would maintain the physical structure of your property.
Well, first of all, CHPs are located throughout the city.
I'm aware.
It's actually something that government has recommended as a good environmental practice. Regionally, it will reduce 41% of the emissions that we experience over using the electric grid. And I can recall talking to you before that, that at the fence line or at our property line, that virtually the emissions are non-detectable. So we've worked very, very hard to make sure it's the best project that we can make. That location will also power the Chestnut Hill East, the Fox Chase line, lines that operate in the city of Philadelphia. It's really part of our overall efforts to really be in line with the 80% reduction of emissions by 2050, and we're on track to do that. We have the second largest solar contract in city's history. We're on our second location of putting the solar panels on the roof. We have an RFP out, request for proposals, for up to 20% of our energy to come from renewable sources. We have one of the greenest bus fleets in the nation, and now are even running all electric buses with no emissions at the bus. We also have the largest program of storing energy on the braking energy of our subway elevated trains in the country. And so we store the braking energy and hold it, and then put it back out when we can use it. So our program is really part of a program of doing things to make sure that we hit the 80% by 50. It's part of our whole strategy of having a very diverse energy portfolio and how we keep our system moving. As far as the property, I would certainly be willing to meet and go over the concerns that the neighbors might have about our property. I don't want that to be an issue that upsets them. So
Okay.
I can follow up with you on that.
What are you doing tomorrow? No, we'll set it up. we will set it up.
No,
we will follow up.
I would very
Absolutely.
much like to do
yes.
that.
Yeah, okay. Very good, because we would like to, you know, at the very least have some improvement in terms of, you know, the footprint and the physical appearance that Septa is having. But I have to say, you know, I understand that it's going to power the Chestnut Hill line, east and west, I assume, and then also it's going to power the Fox Chase line, but it's not in Chestnut Hill, it's not in Fox Chase, it's in Nicetown. And the prevalence of, you know, these sort of power generators, which keep coming and keep coming, and really don't, the impact on the community will not be felt, I don't believe, today or tomorrow. It's for the kids who live in Nicetown who will be impacted years down the road when you and I are well off the scene and they're adults now, and they will be, you know, there will be an effect. I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that there will be an effect. And I know that you say that the numbers are undetectable. I just don't, you know, I do not subscribe to that.
It's also part of SEPTA's overall strategy, though, to reduce emissions in that neighborhood. You know, we've even, I talked about all-electric buses. We are buying 10 all-electric buses to test them out at Midvale and be able to see how we like them. And so, you know, we are working, you know, to reduce emissions in that area as well as part of our overall program. Even using the CHP allows us to turn the boilers off at Midvale. I mean, you know, this is something that we could talk about more. We have talked a lot about.
Well, I certainly welcome the opportunity to have continued conversations and with the community. You know, if we could have some sort of a conversation to figure out what can be done at this point. It's my understanding that the project is almost complete, not quite, but almost complete. And I still think that there might be opportunities for us to be able to do something that's going to be much more beneficial to the community, particularly when we have input from the community.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, let's put it somewhere else. One other question for you. Did the bell ring? Do I still have time?
You're it, so go ahead.
Okay, just one other question then, and that's about street furniture. And I know that that's not, Mike, I don't know if that's you, but you know, one of the things I noticed, and to me this goes to a larger theme in terms of respecting and supporting our ridership. And so it's the amenities, which are really not amenities. It should really, quite honestly, be basics. Things like a police presence and feeling safe, but also about the ability to, you know, have a seat while I'm waiting for the bus, or at least have, you know, some sort of an overhead covering, so when it's snowing or when it's raining, that I am protected. And I know we've had these conversations over and over again, but some of our busiest transit routes and stops in the city of Philadelphia that are in the neighborhoods do not have any sort of street furniture or, you know, covering or protection from the elements. And I just don't understand why that's not happening and why it's not happening. We got them at every stop in Center City, okay? We got every place in Center City. But if you're over at Germantown and Shelton, if you're at Broad and Erie, if you're at even some parts of Broad and Olney in that area. You know, I could just go on and on. If you're on North 22nd Street, all of the high rider areas in my district where you have a large amount of people who are taking the bus, there is no, you know, covering protection whatsoever. And even one that constantly just, you know, annoys me, which is not you, but it's outside of the city, but I don't know how you work with, you know, folks on the other side of, you know, Cheltenham Avenue and in the counties. But at the, what is that? I guess it would be considered the Cedarbrook. It used to be Cedarbrook Mall back in the day, but Cedarbrook Shopping Center. There is a place where people wait for the bus, and what they've done is they've taken shopping carts, you know, they'll roll their shopping cart there, tip it over, and sit on it while they're waiting for the bus. And there's no dignity in having to, you know, do such a thing. Like, we should provide And I think that Septa has a role in this too, even though Septa does not directly provide the service. But that is something that I think Septa has a responsibility to provide, some very basic accommodations for people who are using, your buses for transportation. Just a simple structure that provides, covering from the elements as well as an opportunity to sit down when you've done your shopping. This should just be a basic. And whether it's in the city or outside of the city, I would like to see the city of Philadelphia, when it's in the city, to have a stepped up and increased role. But when it's outside of the city, that SEPTA should step in and make it happen.
Thank you for your comments. We definitely do support the idea that folks would have shelter when they're waiting for the buses. We're working to get throughout the neighborhoods as much as possible shelters. There's a program, we work with an advertiser who actually constructs and designed and constructs and installs the shelters. And so there's 600 new shelters that we're working over a period of 7 years, and we're about 2 years into that program, 2.5 years into that program, getting those out. There should be shelters coming to the high ridership areas in your district, so I'll go back and look. I know Cheltenham and Green was one location where we worked very hard to coordinate with the park improvements to make sure that there was that there was shelter for folks waiting for the bus, but we can sit down and look at the program we've got coming forward. There have been some issues that have come up. We think we've worked through that with respect to making sure that we have access to power. For these, we're looking at doing a pilot for solar power in locations that don't have good opportunities to draw power directly from the street.
Why do you need power to shelter?
For the lights.
It would light would be inside of the shelter.
So at nighttime, people aren't sitting in the dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we could sit down and give you a little bit more detail. The program's rolling along, but we want to pick up the pace a little bit so that you do have more folks getting better coverage.
If you could give us the plan, like what's the plan? Like, how are we going to get this done? Because I've been talking about this for over 8 years now, and I've seen minimal progress. And, it's something that comes up every single year.
Okay.
So I'd really like to see what the plan is and how we're going to get this done and what the time frame is, because this is something that should be a priority if we respect our riders.
Understood.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was finished my line of questioning, and I want to thank Councilwoman Bass for mentioning the shelter issue that's at Cedarbrook Mall, which is contiguous to the 9th Councilmatic District and divided by Cheltenham Avenue. That I've had multiple conversations with SEPTA along with Cedarbrook Mall. I just want SEPTA to state for the record, or let me just backtrack a bit and say thank you, because we worked using an intergovernmental cooperative planning arrangement with Mount Airy USA during Anuj Gupta's tenure that placed shelters and signage throughout Northwest Philadelphia that came from funding that we were able to secure in Harrisburg, along with a match of funding that we were able to secure in Philadelphia. So I'm not sure if management could ask one of the staff members who are familiar with what we did relative to that signage and or the shelters that were put up. Is there anyone there that could give us a brief overview of that?
We'll have to get back to you on that. I know it was right after the passage of Act 89, right?
Indeed, because the dollars we secured were from the multi-modal fund. And I do want to state for the record that we have, for the benefit of residents who live in the 9th Councilmatic District, in the 50th Ward, in the 10th Ward, which use Cedarbrook Mall, we have talked and communicated with the mall management on numerous occasions about them actually being responsible for playing a role as the private sector in this process. So this is what I would ask SEPTA to do, particularly when we're talking about economic commercial corridors that are owned by the private sector, that there are so many things that we should be investing our dollars in, that we find a way to make this a public-private partnership where the owner of the mall also has an economic responsibility to make a contribution there. Extremely important for us. And I just wanted to get that on the record, because to be quite frank, to residents in the 9th Councilmanic District, I would much rather Septa be making investments in Broughton Olney for more cameras, in Broughton Olney for planners, at Broughton Olney for banners, to change the physical aesthetic appeal, than having to solely front the cost for something that the private sector should also be making a contribution to where it is possible. That is different from shelters along Philadelphia streets. But as it relates to that mall in particular, that is being financed by residents primarily from Philadelphia, we do think that the private sector should make a contribution there. And I want to state that just for the record. Thank you.
Councilwoman Bass.
Yes. I have one last question, and it's on the key cards. And so can you talk about, really quickly, the amount that is required on the key card, that is a minimum of $5?
Yeah, it started at 10, we've dropped it to 5, and we're studying whether we can drop it even lower.
So now let me ask you a question. If I have $2.50, and I'm just trying to get from point A to point B, and I only want to purchase, add that to my key card, am I able to do that?
No.
So then what?
Currently, the minimum load and reload is $5, but we are looking at options to reduce that because we've heard from a number of our customers that if they want to add less than $5, that's not currently possible. So we're looking to see if we can pilot some locations where we can reduce that in response to a number of requests that we've had from our customers. It's a very concern for us.
Okay, so when will a decision be made in terms of whether you'll accept?
We're currently looking at it right now.
Okay.
We were hoping to actually pilot something this week at a couple of locations to be able to reduce that below the $5 threshold. Okay, so my concern with the pilot program is that if you just do it in certain locations, what'll happen is, if you do it at Broad and Erie, then at Broad and Allegheny, I'm expecting I'll be able to do the same thing too. So if it's a successful pilot, which we hope that it is.
How long will the pilot period be?
It would be very short time.
What's very short?
We want to make sure that the kiosks, that the bill validators and the equipment are functioning so that we don't have issues with equipment problems. Should that be successful, we're talking weeks, not months.
Okay. So within the next few weeks, this situation could be resolved.
Yes, we're working on it very quickly on that particular issue.
Okay. And one last question also on the key card. So when people purchase a TransPass, or what used to be a TransPass, there was the assumption when the key card came online that this would function the same way, and it does not. And so I'm just curious as to is there any reason why Septa did not alert the riding public that there would be a limit on the number of trips you could actually take? So a Septa TransPass previously was unlimited for the duration of the pass, whether it was for the week or for the month or whatever. If you want to take 1,000 trips, you can take 1,000 trips. But now with the key card, you can take a certain number of trips, which people did not realize, but you're paying the same price.
At the fare increase hearings 2 years ago, we talked about implementing ride limits for both the weekly and monthly pass. Based on the comments that were received at those hearings, we increased the rides for both weekly and monthlies to protect more than 99% of our customers who are using the key card. We looked at data that was available in terms of the number of trips that were made, and in response to the comments that were made at the hearing, we increased the ride limits fairly significantly.
Okay, that doesn't really, I don't really understand exactly what SEPTA thought in terms of implementing that policy and how it would be helpful to the riding public. Are you saying that the ridership asked for limitations on the number of trips they could take? Or?
One of the things that we were looking at and that we heard was that there was pass sharing and that to have unlimited rides with the pass sharing, that we tried to protect against that.
Okay, I see. Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I have I have like 17 questions I want to ask you. I'm just kidding. Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Of course.
You don't want to leave?
We're done?
You want to stay? No, you can go. Thank you.